Okay, so hopefully they're on their way to you now. So I'm absolutely delighted to be here today and to be able to share the research that was commissioned by Scottish Government looking at lived experience for men and women who sell or exchange sex and their experiences of accessing support. So the part that this research focuses on is that access of support, really zoning in on what people's experiences are. And hopefully some of the quotes that I'm going to use today will really bring that to life. So we're going to hear from some of the women and some men who this is their lived experience, and see what that means, kind of away from the policy discussions, almost to them as an individual, what that feels like to be trying to access support for selling or exchanging sex in Scotland. So I should say this work was immensely collaborative. I know there'll be some people here today who've contributed. It was really supported by services and individuals across Scotland. So whilst I'm here speaking, this was a huge team effort. And I think that that's really helped us to achieve something that hopefully represents people's lived experience. So the aims of this research, we set out 3 aims. I'm not going to be able to cover them all today.
Laura, could I just stop you for a second? I can't see any slides. Can other people see them?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I can see them.
Yes, I can see them.
Okay, I can't see anything, so I don't know what that is. Okay, thanks, folks.
Okay, as long as some of you can see it, that's fine. I never know with technology whether it's me pressing the wrong button. But the aims of the research were to map current provision for services in Scotland for people who sell or exchange sex and identify any gaps in provision. We wanted to understand how people who sell or exchange sex experience engaging with mainstream specialist support services. So whether that's the specialist services for supporting them, or also mainstream services, which I'll dive into a little bit later what I meant by that. And specifically there, we are really interested in identifying barriers to access, what's stopping people being able to engage with support. And we also wanted to gather views from people with lived experience on future service design, which follows on quite neatly. If there are barriers, what can we change? What would make that easier? What can be done better? So for the data collection, for the whole project, we spoke to 71 participants with lived experience. So 62 of these did facilitated surveys, which involved them going to a support service, someone they already had a relationship with, and they'd either fill that in themselves, for example, on a laptop or something in the service, or they might do that in collaboration with the support worker if they needed that support around the technology. There was also 9 face-to-face interviews, which took place remotely, and those were for people who maybe weren't engaged with services or would rather not have that mediation involved. There was also a mapping survey, which I'm not going to focus on so much today, which was looking at the first research aim, which involved 42 professionals, maybe some people here, 29 from Violence Against Women partnerships and 13 from specialist services, and we covered 31 local areas. So nearly everybody managed to get that picture of what's going on with support services in Scotland at the moment. So the lived experience participants, who were they? There was 71. You won't be surprised that most of them were women. 65 were women. We also spoke to 3 men and 3 people who said they were non-binary. The age range, the majority of people were 35 to 44. So perhaps more representation in that middle age range, slightly less in the 18 to 24s and over 55s as well. We got representatives from the major cities in Scotland and some from more rural areas. So we got a bit of a mix. We wouldn't claim to be representative because it's qualitative research, but we did try and get opinions from across Scotland and a range of different views, different landscapes we know inform the type of service that is needed. So what do people say? What came out of this? I'm not going to focus on the mapping survey, as I say. I'll give a link at the end if you are interested in that. What I'm going to do is really use the participants' words today to try and bring some of this discussion to life. So before I do that, I think that this graph is really interesting. This is out of the research. This was maybe the thing that surprised me the most that came out of it. So what you're seeing here is along one axis is the number of participants, and along the bottom are the mainstream services accessed. So these are types of services. So for example, addictions would be one type of service. It could be that an individual accesses 5 different addiction services. They might access the needle exchange and a recovery cafe and an NHS service, and all of that would still just be one type of service. So across all the people we spoke to, the average participant accessed between 6 and 7 types of service. So some of these, it went up to 12 there. Everybody accessed some kind of service. So I include this graph here because I think it's really important to understand the amount of appointments that people are juggling, the amount of services that people are trying to engage with here. So when we talk about those barriers to engagement, the amount of impact that might have on a week by week. If you're trying to access 7 types of service, which remember might or might not represent many more actual individual services, and these barriers are going to really impact on you day by day, week by week. So with that in mind, here are some of the ways that people said they felt trying to access services in the first place. You can see they felt scared, embarrassed, shame, guilty, panicked, unsafe, self-conscious, stuck, in denial, uncomfortable, too proud, not really a positive picture. And there were some other things that people said as well presented as barriers. So outside of those emotional barriers, that feeling of being uncomfortable, uneasy, stuck, there were some really practical things that came out as well. So people said a barrier was identifying a service in the first place, didn't know where they were, didn't know what they provided. Practicalities, were they on the bus routes? What days were they open? Were they open at times that people could access them? The emotional barriers we spoke about, but some that really came through with trust, fear of judgment, it just not being the right time, not feeling like they're in the right headspace to be able to engage with that support, and also social barriers. So I'm just going to dive into just a couple of those and tell you what participants said about them. So this was what someone said about fear of judgment. And she says, some people don't want to be seen as a victim. I don't see myself that way. I used to, but now I think I'm a survivor. A lot of shit things have happened, but I'm still here. It can be hard to speak to anyone about it. You're scared that you won't be believed or you'll be pitied. You don't want anyone looking down on you. And sometimes when you speak about these things, people just feel sorry for you. So I thought this quote was really powerful in 2 ways. It says that judgment really doesn't make her feel good. I mean, that's obvious, but she doesn't feel good through this quote, that fear of judgment as well as a barrier in itself. But it says actually that judgment can come in 2 forms. So she was worried about being seen as a victim. She was worried about that that expectation that she was going to be a victim, that she had no agency. That for her was a barrier in itself. So I think it says that we need to be really careful about how we frame support. Judgment can look differently than we might expect. So there can be a judgment for selling or exchanging sex in the first place, but also that judgment feeling that they don't want to be seen as a victim. That's not in how they identify in the place they are at the moment. So this is what somebody said as well about social barriers. So this was just one of several social barriers that came up. And this person says, I wasn't too happy with lots of men around, as I hadn't had 2 good experiences of men in my life from when I was young. There were always men hanging around in front of the building, and I hated having to walk through them. So whilst this is a social barrier, it's a really practical barrier as well. That for some women, if there's men hanging around outside a building, if there's big groups of people that you don't want to see, it's maybe not even worth going to that service, even if you want to. So that social network that exists outside of the support still very much informs whether people felt able to access support there. So as well as looking at barriers, we looked at the impact that services have and also about engagement, their experiences of engagement. So the 2 big things that came out that influenced impact in a positive or a negative way and people's ability to engage were the workers and the service offer. So for the workers, what was really important, it was that they felt knowledgeable, that the person felt that this person is someone who understands me, they know what I'm talking about, they understand what I'm going through, even if it's not their lived experience, that they know the impact that selling or exchanging sex might have had on me. Not being heard, so going into a service feeling like you're saying one thing and the other person's hearing something else. That was a really common experience. And then they left going, well, why did I bother? I've opened myself up to access this service. I've spoken about things that are difficult for me, and I'm just not being heard. I'm not getting through. There's a misunderstanding of what these terms mean to me, and they mean to this professional that I am speaking to. Consistency. You don't want to go in one day and they go, come on in, have a cup of tea. The next day you go in, nope, not welcome, bad mood, not got any time for you. That consistency. So consistency in that, but also consistency in terms of staff members. Some people said that they formed really strong attachments to an individual and then that individual would leave. So we know that there are issues around funding. We know there are issues around burnout and all sorts of things around high turnover, but this can also have an impact on people's ability to engage. It can be that individual worker that they trust. So what can we do about that? Can it be that there's a support network for the supporters to enable that to be more consistent? Or is it a case of making sure that people feel supported by multiple people within an organisation? What are the approaches to that? Being treated like a human was a really key thing, and that should be so basic, but it wasn't. But feeling that they were treated like a human, that people would go, oh, how are you? Have a cup of tea, that kind of thing on the way in, wasn't always the case. They often felt like professionals were ticking boxes, going through the list rather than relating to them as a human being. And this thing about judgment comes up again. So judgment runs throughout this whole piece of research really, really strongly. If you feel like you're judged, you're not going to open up. In terms of the service offer, there needs to be really clear what the service was offering. So some people offer support, but what is support? What does support look like? What does that look like day to day, week by week? What is the end goal of support? So some of these kind of nebulous terms that we think we understand, it's not really clear what is being offered there. The support needs to be tailored, so it needs to be something that people actually need and want. And also what was really effective amongst the people we spoke to was that combination of practical and emotional support. So just emotional support or just practical support didn't seem to work. It was really, really effective where the two things happened simultaneously. So again, I'm just going to use some quotes to dive into just a couple of these to really illustrate what people were saying around this. So this is a quote that I love because it was an example of good practice. And in this quote, the person speaking, she just really sums up all of the good things that other people are saying. Her worker seems to have got it, which is something I should say. There was some really good practice reflected in this. So she says about her worker, she's always made me feel comfortable. And since day one, I knew I'd made the right choice reaching out to that service for support because we clicked right away and there's no judgment or pitying me. We just got on with it. I can speak to my worker about anything because I know she'll just take it as it is and come up with a plan. She gives me a kick up the arse when I need it, and I know she's always just a text or phone call away and she'll get back to me. I've never had to chase her up or felt like a burden for getting in touch in the first place. So there's some wonderful stuff here. She feels comfortable since day one. She's reached out, she goes, yep, this is the right thing. There's a practical plan. There's some motivation, I guess we'll call it, a kick up the arse. And also that consistency of being there at the end of the text, being there at the end of the phone call, that she knows that she can reach out whenever and she'll get a response. She never had to chase her up. So this is a big thing. This worker is doing what she said she will do. And this one here is about not being heard. So this person said, she's gone in and they've just acted as if it's normal and it's fine and you'll get over it and whatever. Meanwhile, I was struggling with my mental health. I was struggling with a lot of things in my life, but nobody actually said, right, okay, I can see you're struggling and you need some help to get out of this situation that you're in. Nothing. It didn't matter how many times I screamed and shouted about this awful thing I was involved in. Nobody did anything anyway. So this quote, sadly, it was something that was reflected again by multiple people throughout the research, saying I've been selling and exchanging sex and it has had this impact on me. And people going, well, I don't know why, it shouldn't have done. And that's the end of the conversation. Or you're choosing to do this, therefore you're not entitled to feel that trauma. There was all sorts of really terrible and really problematic responses in that. And I think this woman sums up really powerfully how that felt to her. So that feeling about not being heard, about taking that courage to go into the service, to tell your story, to reach out and get that help, and really feeling like you're being met with a brick wall. And this is a quote which really speaks to what I was saying about that mix of practical and emotional support. So the need for both to happen simultaneously. So this person spoke about feeling that they're not really getting anything practical. So there was emotional support there and that was lovely, but nothing practical. So she says, It does infuriate people, and people find themselves in my position. They become infuriated because they become a person that just floats around in these organisations where they're kind of being helped and they're kind of not being helped. You're not really able to move forward, and you're just floating around in all these different charities and organisations. You're doing things, but it's not actually doing what you need it to be doing. So I think this speaks to two things. The idea that emotional support alone, for some people, if they're at the point where they're ready to do something practical or they have something in mind, might not be enough, but also the need for tailored support. I think this really speaks to the need for tailored support and what I was saying earlier about having a really clear service offer. So people approaching this service know what they're going to get out of it at the end. They know what that's going to look like. So their expectations aren't, it could be that this service, that was exactly what they offered, but this woman wasn't clear that that's what she was getting. She was expecting something else, and that really leaves people reluctant to reach out further. So that is me for today. There's a link there to the full report. I've really just dipped into the surface of it. So if you haven't read it, please do if you're interested. And thank you very much for having me.